Awesome. All right. Well, again, thank you, everybody. Really, really excited. My name is Mark Furstein. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Recapped. If you couldn't tell by the neon lights and the hoodie, and it's about the only thing I wear nowadays. Really, really excited to dive in today. We're going to cover about an hour worth of content, and then we're going to save 30 minutes for a Q&A. So stick around if you want. All of this will be recorded. Everyone will get a copy of this afterwards. And we have a couple of things that we're going to unveil as well at the end as takeaways and really just freebies to help you put a lot of these things into practice. So maybe Brady, you want to kick us off with a quick intro? Tell us who you are, tell us what you do, and let's go around the room.
Great. Yes, I do have this very crazy spelling of my name, but it's just Brady, like Tom Brady. It's very simple pronunciation, but crazy spelling. I am the chief operating officer for a sales growth company. So kind of think of me as like the Wozniak for Keenan.
It's a good analogy.
Hello, everyone. I am Tony Wadensky. I am a certified trainer and partner with Gap Selling. So I'm partner of Brady and Keenan and those folks. I have my own company, RevUp Sales, where we focus on sales apps, rev ops, jump starts. So really meant to be outcome-based, outcome-driven to help get organizations more efficient, more working in the right direction as quickly as possible. So that's a little bit about me. I've been 15 years in sales, half as an individual contributor, half as a sales manager, sales leader, head of enablement. Nice to meet you all.
J.R. Butler. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Ship Group. We help former elite athletes and military veterans break into the exciting career of sales, where I spent 16 years after a long hockey career as a individual contributor and VP and CRO at many enterprise software companies and in the reseller space. This is a sales process, deal management, huge passion of mine, something I don't get to spend as much time on anymore because we're mostly helping folks get into entry level the last 18 months, but it's something that we teach in our training program. So really excited to be here today.
Awesome. And what's up, everybody? I'm David Weiss. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer of The Sales Collective. We're a sales transformation firm. So we help people build process, onboard, hire, train, develop, do all the things to help startups scale. And then on the side, I kind of talk about MedPick just a little bit, so that's me. Appreciate y'all tuning in and joining.
Yeah, I think I've seen one or two posts about Medic on your timeline, just a little bit. All right, great. So we're 8 minutes in. We have a lot to cover. We're going to make this as rapid fire, as tactical as we possibly can. David, since you were last, why don't we kick this off, right? Topic of today, or the main topic, is what is the difference between sales process versus deal management?
Yeah, so I like to think of these as layers. So like sales process, these are the stages. Okay. I've got, discovery, and I've got my needs analysis and solution presentation and proposal, and, prospecting at the start, and, solution alignment at the end, as shown on the screen as an example. These are the things that are going to guide me through, hey, what do I kind of need to be doing? What does this process essentially look like that I go through? And it's, it's the details of, a little bit of what to do in each of those stages, the outcomes that we're looking for. Training then goes into, okay, here's how we're actually going to execute effectively these stages. So it gets into absolutely the what versus the how. You got deal qualification there in the bottom. That's bad. That's, is this deal even qualified for me to work? I get into deal management. Deal management is my jam. What I want to do is I want to look at, as I'm going through the act of selling, as I'm executing my sales process, did I miss something in the how I sell motion? And that's what deal management is. Deal management is, as I'm going through the act of doing all of these things, as working with my hopeful future customer, what did I miss? Did I miss defining, a certain thing? Did I not get granular enough about a piece of data? Did I not engage a certain stakeholder? It's the gap analysis inside of the deal I am working. And I like to pause as soon as you drag some coffee, just to cause a delay.
Yeah, let's do it. No, I love what you said, right? It's, I wanted to break these out into a couple different ways, right? We always think of deal qualification and deal management as one and the same. I put band up here because it's the most common one, right? I think we have some opinions on the efficacy, of Bant, which we can also dive into as well. But I think for me personally, and shout out to Crystal and our team who spent hours putting this together, surprisingly difficult to, make it intuitive. It's, I guess, Brady, I'd love to turn it over to you, right? How do you, what are some of the issues that you see with, the sales training, the deal management, like the differences between, what are your thoughts?
Wait, sorry, the differences between deal management and qualification
Or sorry, deal management and sales process.
and sales process. I mean, I agree with David, right? He explained it perfectly. It's like your process is essentially your opportunity, like stages. That's very, very straightforward. But like deal management is there actually enough quality information? Did you miss something? Did you leave something undefined? Do you have a data deficit that is not allowing you to, to really understand what's happening? And I had shared a story with you guys on a prep call around sometimes they'll do a deal review in the sales cycle. And so we had a company that had reached out to us and they were like, I feel like we're doing gap selling today, said everybody who's read the book. And they were like, I don't know if the training is going to work. I feel like we're doing it. And I was like, fuck it. Hand me your most difficult deal and I'll do a deal review. And I'll see if you've got blind spots, right? It's the fastest path to understanding is it true? Are they executing gap selling? Are they not? And this was like a deal that had been in their pipeline for 2.5 years. They thought they had covered all their bases. They had excessive data and notes from technical discovery. And for context, they basically do like secret manufacturing. And so a company reached out to them to essentially reduce their cost of manufacturing. They learned they could reduce by 20%, but for 2.5 years, it just lingered. They didn't ghost them. They were like, not now, not now, not now. We're still considering other things. Delay, highly communicative. And, so the sales team just were at their wits end. I'm like, we don't understand a 20% reduction is huge. So I'm looking at this and I was like, well, let's back up to the beginning, right? 2.5 years of work. Let's back up to the beginning. Did they ever share with you how much they were looking to reduce their cost of manufacturing by? And they're like, no. Do you understand why they're trying to reduce the cost of manufacturing in the first place? And they're like, no. I'm like, well, it seems to me you need the answer to those two questions. And they went back to the buyer and they asked those two simple questions. And it turned out they needed to reduce the cost of manufacturing by around 45% because a Chinese company had copied their products like near perfectly. And they were losing market share at an exponential rate, where basically like in 5 years, they were probably going to go out of business and be bankrupted. And once they were equipped, once they were like, oh, now we know, it changed the entire conversation. They're like, oh, we now can advise you on what materials could potentially be changed out, like to understand that, like what was actually happening. They were able to show up as trusted advisors. That's deal management, right? To be able to look at it and say, hey, you know what? You've got this blind spot and this blind spot is critical. So that's deal management. So I love how David put it, right? You've got your process, you've got your training on how to actually do the process, but then you have that deal management stage where you really need that second set of eyes to look at it, which is what your managers and leaders should be doing to help highlight these blind spots, the quality and completeness of the information.
Yeah. And Brady, how I often relate it to, just for an analogy for folks, sales training is the car. That's the car you're going to drive from point A to point B. Sales process is the map. And then deal management, MedPick or whatever else you want to use, that's your blind spot detector. That's how you make sure you don't get into a freaking accident or like crash into another car, as you're driving along. And you need all three.
Yeah, I love that analogy. You shared that analogy on LinkedIn. And I was like, that is the best analogy ever for what that is.
Yeah. And, I think actually last time when we talked, right, when we were prepping for this, JR, you had a really great point about, how good sales leaders think about this. Do you mind sharing some of that?
Yeah, I think, they're all interrelated, right? So when you think about it, and it's not, what you have sometimes is sales leaders, obviously we all know the average tenure of a sales leader is like 18 months. So people are bouncing around a lot now, and they're moving between ICPs, they're moving between ASPs, and they're moving between ideal buyer personas. And the reality is what worked in one isn't going to work in the other necessarily, right? And that's where companies like your guys' are going to help think about that. But also, I think as a sales leader, you know, my own experience is a great example of this. Like my average deal price, my entire career in sales was over $500,000, literally since I was 24 years old. Now I sell a software that costs 15 grand a year. If I tried to go and bring my software to market and run through the same sales process, the same training, and the same deal management that I've done my entire career, then I would be turning my sales cycles into these ridiculously long, unnecessary motions, because I don't need to do all the same stuff that I did when I was selling, $1 million unbudgeted software into IT operations. Now I'm selling access to a platform to sales leaders to get talent. Like it's a different conversation, right? And each thing needs to really drive the next. In my opinion, and I'm sure I know David would agree with me, it really starts with, in my opinion, deal management is like at the foundation, because it's like, hey, if we're going to convince someone to spend this much money, what are the things that we really need to understand in order to do that? Okay, we need to understand these things, and we need them to tell us these things. We can't just assume anything. And if we don't, we're not, like, they're really not going to probably buy our software. Okay, this is what we need to train our reps on. And this is the process they're going to need to go through to sell our software. And a great sales leader will understand their market enough to know, hey, if I'm going to go into my ICP, like I'll use Shift Group as an example. I'm going to go to a VP of sales and ask for 15 grand. What do I really need to understand about that? Okay, I just really need to know these two things. All right, so this is what I'm going to train the people I hire to know. And this is the process we're going to go through. And I'll tell you, it's a lot different selling $15,000 talent management software than it is selling, automation software into 4 different departments in IT. It's easier, candidly. But the difference is that I understand that I see personally a lot of sales leaders that don't. It goes both ways. You see people moving from enterprise into transactional and transactional into enterprise. And you need to know that difference. I think that's the biggest mistake I see sales leaders make, especially when they first join a company.
Yeah. And Jared, as a leader, and I want to go back to kind of what Brady was saying a second ago, it's like we teach salespeople, just like you said, to gather all of this information. And it's really good information. Sales training teaches us to gather all of this information. The job of the sales leader from a deal management perspective is to look at that information and say, cool, you did a great job gathering lots and lots of information. Here's where you missed something. Here's where there's a gap in that information. And that's to Brady's point. If you manage the deal and deal management properly, you can analyze all of it and distill it down to, oh, you did an awesome job, but right here, we don't know this. This is why you're going to go figure that out.
Yeah, I think our first takeaway here that we hope everyone really has heard and understood is that we really are all in agreement of these 3 separate pieces, that there is the sales process. That's kind of what we have to do to make the sale. There's the kind of sales execution piece. That's your framework. That's your methodology. That's the how. And then the deal management, deal qualification piece is how confident are we that we have the information that this is actually going to close. So first takeaway I would say is we really want everyone to understand that these 3 separate pieces. I am super passionate and super focused on trying to help organizations create alignments from marketing, sales, customer success. And all of these things really need to come together. Everyone needs to be rowing the canoe in the right direction, right? You've got to be doing your step. And, for me, like everyone needs to be on the same page. Like I start talking to larger organizations. The AEs have no idea what the sales methodology is. They have no idea what their deal qualification is. Teams are doing different things on their own. And it's just going to crush the ability to create predictable revenue. So if anything, like first takeaway, notice that there's these different steps, and how can we start to create alignments amongst those 3?
Yeah. And look, guys, it's the 3 different steps, and they should be done in that order. If you don't have a documented process, go build a documented process. If you have one and you haven't enabled people with training on how to execute the process, go get training and execute it. Our friends at Gap are great on that. After you've done those things and you have a lot of repeatability in those motions, now analyze specific deals and say, okay, in the how we do these things, why are we losing and what are we missing? And if we figured that out, where we go with it, you need the three, because if you try and start doing a bunch of deal management, but you don't have a process, you don't have training, you're going to be like, well, okay, cool. How do I go solve this problem now and scale it and make it repeatable to everybody? You can't. So you need to do it. It needs to do it.
Like
Go
Tony
ahead,
and I
Brady.
were, sorry, JR. Tony and I were actually in an opportunity together recently. And one of the things that was really, really glaringly obvious to us, right, not to the prospective buyer, was this concept of like quality versus quantity, right? So they thought they were doing deal management, and they were looking at it and they're like, yeah, my people are great. They have all these notes, and every deal has 2,000-3,000 words of notes. And, I know they're working and I know they're doing the activity and they're putting it into the CRM. And there was this really like this kind of like positive look on the team. And, they were like, well, it's really not too bad. We're making money. And Tony and I are like looking at the actual notes that are in there. And while they had the quantity and on the surface level, it looked good, it lacked quality. So like the notes had things like, and their dog's name is Fido, and they really enjoy these hobbies. And we had a great conversation. And, and it was like, it just fluff. It like fluff, 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 fluff. But there was nothing in the like thousands of words that were recorded that had any bearing on whether or not they should be considering or buying the product. So it lacked the quality side, right? But there was this underlying thought of sales leadership that if they had quantity, that their team were doing well. And so deal review, like deal management and having that like feedback loop and scoring of the quality is just so important to really know your deal health.
Well, I love that point too, right? Because yes, you may have all of this quantity, but what are the outcomes and what are the results of that? Right. So if you have all of this, but then you're still not closing deals or deals are still stalling, something is broken in there. Right. And to your point, it becomes very clear that the quality of the information in there is not actually attributing to this. Right. And JR, I can't believe you kind of rock my world on this, but you're telling me we don't need MedPick when I'm selling a B2C Shopify widget, right? Like it's surprising, right?
Yeah. And actually, I think I want to take a step back and just comment on something, because here's what's happened the last 5 to 7 years in sales. Sales all of a sudden became cool to get a sales job, right? We went from everybody thought it was a used car salesman to everybody thinks you can get a sales job, make $200,000 a year and work 20 hours a week. So we've got a lot of new sellers, and now the combination of that with the advent of, LinkedIn influencing becoming a thing, you have a lot of people that are really loud voices because a lot of people follow them, complaining about the idea of my boss is a jerk because they're asking me to forecast the deal and they're asking me to do dysfunctional things at the end of the quarter because they want to hit their number, and these evil corporations and evil investors and exec. So like, I want to take a step back and talk about really quickly, like a huge part of your job as a sales professional is being able to forecast when a deal will close. And I don't think that early salespeople, especially people that have gotten into it in the last 5 years when companies were hitting their numbers, understand how important that is and why predictable revenue matters. And I can tell you, as someone who's sat in boardrooms and now runs a company, I make every decision in my business, hiring decisions, investments in new products, thinking about getting into new markets. It's based off looking at our business and understanding what's coming in for revenue this quarter and what does things look like right now for next quarter, and so forth and so on. So the reason this stuff is important, I don't care if you're in your first AE job, your job is to be able to look at your boss in the middle of the quarter and intelligently tell them what's going to close and why it's going to close. So I know there's probably a lot of leaders listening here, but for those young sellers who are following these influencers on LinkedIn, there is a real business reason why this stuff is really important. And you're not going to go very far in this profession if you don't figure out how to get good at calling a number. And that's what all of this is for. I just wanted to kind of clear the air on that a little bit.
Yeah. And you have
Yeah. And to jump in on that, like when that doesn't happen, when that stops working, when the forecasts continue to be off quarter after quarter, year after year, the ramifications are what we saw at the end of 2022 all through this year in terms of layoffs. Because when companies can't predict what they're doing, good or bad, they have to make this knee-jerk reaction to help get them back on track from a bottom number perspective, even if they are, not profitable at that point. They still need to have this knee-jerk reaction if they continue to miss, because they're already, think of a traditional SaaS model, right? Most companies are giving up for revenue to pay for sales, pay commissions, et cetera, and they're banking on years 2, 3, 4, et cetera. And so if you start to miss year one, you're not just missing year one, you're missing year 2, year 3, year 4. And so if we can't get good at this, if we can't get better at this, we're going to continue to see all these layoffs happening in sales, and everybody needs to get back to their bottom line, and regardless of what's going on at the top.
Yeah, so that's a great point. I mean, think about it. If you tell the business, oh, we're going to close X, the business then needs to do something about that. So they need to hire customer success people to support all those new clients. They then need to, potentially think about that and hire more salespeople. They then need to start looking at their roadmap and say, what does the future look like? They make lots of decisions based on how much money they're going to make. And if they're off and they planned and did all those things, because you have to be ahead of those things. You can't just be like, oh, we now close the quarter. Cool. Now we need to go support all the things we just sold. No, you have to kind of, hire and ramp and get people ready to do all the things. Like these are lags. So they're predicting the future and using that future prediction to make lots of decisions. You mess that up. Now, to your point, all of those things happen. And look, I'm going to make one more comment on this. And then, Mark, I know you got something, but this doesn't need to be a black hole, folks. Companies without deal management, ballpark, have a 50% forecast accuracy, plus or minus a little bit. It's a flip of a coin. Companies with good deal management, and we were all talking about this, that actually get it right, have a 90+% forecast accuracy. We'll never get to 100. Stuff's always going to happen. But there's a massive difference between a flip of a coin and being right 90% of the time. You can actually, design a business around 90%. You can't. So anyways.
No, I love this, right? And I think especially for all the leaders, right? This is so top of mind right now, because like everyone on this panel I speak to sales leaders all day, every day. And the number one thing that they're all coming to us is, listen, we're missing our forecast number because we can't, right? We're not even comparing apples to apples in these deals. We're comparing apples to bowling balls, right? This is crazy. So I guess on that vein, and David, I'll spit this back to you and then we can go around the room. But one of the biggest things I always hear when I'm talking to leaders is like, oh, what's your methodology? How are you managing? Oh yeah, our methodology, we use Medic. And so, well, okay, sure. I'll let it slide because we only have 20 minutes, but what are your thoughts around Medic as a methodology? I know you've got a couple things to say on this, but also going back to your earlier point, how can leaders make sure that they get to that 90% accuracy through good deal management?
Yeah. So look, Medic, MedPick, what have you, but all the methodology is a consistent way of doing a thing. Okay. So, but there's categories for methodologies. So GAP is a sales training methodology, and you guys do deal management. No, I don't want to discount that. MedPick is a deal management methodology. Okay. If you start trying to use a deal management methodology as your sales methodology, to quote Mr. Garrison, you're going to have a bad time. Okay. Don't do that. Use methodologies in the appropriate scenarios. So MedPick is not a process. It's not meant to be done linearly. You don't start with M, end at one of the C's, and go in freaking order. If you're not implicating pain, just start. That's right in the middle. There's no deal. Okay. So you start with pain and you go around. And our friends at Gap, when it comes to, problem-centric selling, pain, problem, they define these things again semantically different than I do, but that's okay. The point is we all agree. You got to have a problem. If there's no problem, there's no deal. So you start there. Anyways, not a process, not a sales methodology, not just for enterprise. I would challenge anyone. And I was actually on with Andy White, who is one of the other, major, voices in the Meta community recently. And I got MedPick all the way down to selling door-to-door pest control. Yeah, you're not going to go as deep with it, but you still need to understand, do they have a reason to buy economically? Who makes the decision? What's the process? What do they want in a pest control provider? Then do they have a problem with their current provider? How do decisions get made and when would they change because their contract? You need all that stuff. So anyways, that's key. It is a deal management methodology. Mark, what was the other half?
How can leaders effectively deal manage and forecast? I guess, right? That's probably the $1 million question here that everyone's wondering about.
Yeah. And look, I know the GAP folks will talk about this as well, but I don't care what methodology you use. If you treat it as a checklist or you treat it as something you're just going to gather lots of information, it's not going to be able to help you cut through the noise and see the reality. How I use MedPig is through a color coding system, red, yellow, green. Each of the letters has scoring criteria that would equal red, yellow, or green based on the completeness and validation of the information. Once you get to green, you can move on to the next. Once you get everything to green, you have very high accuracy. Now, Joe Fenn put in the comments, compelling event. Yes, compelling events are important. Compelling events tie to decision process, which also then tie to a virtual paper process. Once you nail paper process, decision process, depending on the complexity of the deal, high complexity deals with high legal processes need paper process. If you don't have a lot of legal, you can take it out. It's mostly about the business process, decision process. So once you understand those things, and once you get completeness of information in each of the letters, you can get to very high forecast accuracy because of the completeness of the correct data. So I could go on about this and stop. I don't want to monopolize it, but yeah, over to my other panelists here.
Yeah, I would just honestly push strong ass agreement. We've put out in some of our marketing criticism around MedPick, but it's not because of proper MedPick. It's this Franken version that people use constantly. And we see it when people reach out and they're like, oh, we're considering GAP, but we're a MedPick organization today. And we get into it. And I'm like, you're not a MedPick organization because you're just using it as a bunch of check boxes. The leadership is looking and they're like, is there words or letters in the metrics field? Check. Yes. If is there, and is it they're just looking for field entry and not looking at, okay, is this complete? Is this quality? Right. And that's my biggest criticism is not for proper MedPick. It's for all the people out there who are treating this and they read leadership reads a blog and they're like, oh yeah, I can do this. And they treat it as a checklist, and that does not work at all.
I think to the second part of your question, Mark, right? How can leaders get better at this? I think if you do a good job building your deal management structure, right? It should be translated to the expectation of how your reps are interacting with customers. If I'll use my old company. It was called Turbonomic. IBM bought us for $2 billion. We competed against VMware, and VMware had a free product that did most of what we do, right? And you guys have all heard that before in sales. It was 80% of what we did, but that 20% was really critical. But they could get 80% for free with VMware. We went in and we did a 7-figure deal at EMC, who owned VMware, against a free product at a company that they own. And we knew in our deal cycle, we had to get to the chief information officer. We had to get to the CIO. We had never done a 7-figure deal in 11 years of history of the company without talking to the CIO, right? And again, you talk about economic buyer that wasn't our process wasn't MEDDIC, but we knew that if we didn't get to that decision maker that economic buyer, that we were not going to get a deal. In order for a customer to do an evaluation of our technology, the CIO had to sign off on the evaluation. That was the sales process. That's how our reps got a license key to do an evaluation. If they didn't do that, we weren't doing an evaluation, right? You can imagine when we instituted that, what our close rates and our predictability went to much, much higher. So you need to think about what are the things that you need to understand if your customer is going to buy, and then you need to build that into your process. And then to your point, David, you need to train it. You need to show them, how do you get to the CIO? How can you work your way around a large Fortune 2000 organization and get to somebody with a 10, $15 billion budget? It's not easy, but we know we have to do it. So we can feel really good about our pipeline. We can feel really good about all these evaluations we're doing. But if you aren't instituting your deal management criteria into the way that your reps are selling, you might have a couple good board meetings, but get ready for a bunch of bad ones after that.
Yeah. And to kind of jump on that, this is not like deal management, deal qualification is not like the last step, right? This starts right away. We train and coach to managers getting on deals and reviewing deals like right after the discovery call. And so this is a way to get ahead of things, get on top of things, and really help your sellers. And really, as a sales manager, sales leader, like that's what you're supposed to do, right? It shouldn't be this end of quarter event, what's going to close, like all this other, rat race, run around. What are you going to close this month? 2 days before the quarter. Like sometimes we talk to people, we're going to push our meeting off to next week because end of quarter, like this huge event, like it really shouldn't be like that. If managers are getting on deals sooner, if they're helping reps qualify, if they're training and coaching to help them get the information they need early on.
1000%, right? And I guess you guys all bring up really, really great points. Shifting the gears a little bit, right? Because we talked a lot about the internal process and the internal execution. Matt Wright had a really great question here in the comments, right? Knowing that sales is changing and buyers are becoming more selective, they're becoming, they're doing all these G2 reviews. They're coming to you already educated on this, right? The market has shifted. How do you guys think about ensuring that sellers bring value, how they enable champions, and how does that factor into deal management and the sales process? What are you guys thinking about as the landscape is changing?
I'll take this one maybe to start because, as a training company, what we find in every training consistently is that the salespeople have no training, which is kind of mind blowing if you really think about this. Like, you would never do that to any other department in your business. Like, you're not going to hire an accountant who's not a credentialed accountant. You're not going to hire an engineer who doesn't have the right certifications. Like, you wouldn't put anybody in any position in your business. But then when it comes to sales, it's, they'll just figure it out, And so what they do is training is really just product training. The like reps have no actual training in how to facilitate the conversation. They don't have a list of, what are the important things I need to know, right? What are the key metrics that I need to understand? Right? What are the problems I even solve for in the first place? They have no idea. And this is why you see reps, they'll hold 5 minutes of discovery, which is we're pretty much just being like, so what would you like? Just tell me what you want. And then I will show you a generic demo and wash my hands of it because they've never been trained on any of the skills required to sell. So then leaders are like, why is your forecast wrong? Well, they have no idea how to forecast it. They don't even understand why their buyers buy in the first place or should buy. Right? And JR, you said this, you're like, you really need to know your space. You really need to know your customer. You need it's not one fits all. You have to know your space, and nobody's training their reps on it. And then, somebody will pick up and be like, let's start doing deal management. But you're just talking like smoke and mirrors if your reps don't even understand the space at the beginning.
Your reps stop, like so many companies train their new sales reps on their product. When I first started at my old company, we had to do a demo for the CEO before we could get on the phone, right? Which is great. You should be an expert in your technology. Yeah. But you should be spending way more time training your reps on the persona that you're selling to. Like, I saw something on LinkedIn today. Somebody said, you should be able to play the persona you sell to on TV. I'm not a CIO, but I play one on TV. Like, that's how much you should know their world, literally. And I think that's the training that most companies are missing at this point.
Yeah. Even like from an onboarding perspective, right? Like, I did a webinar on this last week. Onboarding is completely backwards. It's all company focused, product focused. Here's how to do the demo. Here's our technology. Here's all our features. Oh, by the way, we sell to CFOs. You should probably know what they care about. And, as a new rep, you get all this information just thrown at you all at once. And then it's up to you to, okay, go figure out now go sell. And instead, when we think about what really needs to happen first is you have to actually be able to have a meaningful conversation with a potential buyer. Meaningful conversation is defined as you actually understand what's going on in the world or can figure out what's going on in the world and be able to help diagnose, okay, can I even help this person? And it actually has nothing to do with your product. It's completely the opposite. It's more about, okay, as a rep, what do I need to try to understand? How am I going to try to understand it? And what information do I need to get? And, I'm trying to flip onboarding completely upside down and help it to start really being more about the buyer.
Yeah.
Love that. Love that.
I agree with, what everybody's saying. And from just the lens I look at things, if someone's going to G2 doing a bunch of research, right? So that means they have established a perspective on the market. What I'm trying to do very, very quickly is understanding what is their decision criteria? What do they want in a solution and why? Because they're trying to solve a problem and we need to understand the root cause and the problem. Yes. But if they've already established that there's a problem, there's already a business case and metrics aligned to it, to make a change. And there's likely already an economic buyer because they came inbound to us because they've already been doing the homework and want to make a change. What really becomes super important is criteria, competition, and champion. Okay. Criteria is what do they want in a solution? And do they actually want the right stuff? I can't tell you how many buyers think they need certain things that they don't, or actually don't know what they need and need other things. So you need to understand, who are you talking to? I've had people come to me and be like, yeah, I'm looking at these 5 vendors. And I'm like, 2 of those aren't even in the same damn category. What are you doing? No, you should be looking at these instead of these. And that happens all the time. So you need to understand what is the criteria that they're looking to buy. Then it's, how well does my solution align to that criteria? If it's right, if it's wrong, I need to reshape it. If it's right, I need to see how closely I align to it. Because if I don't align closely to it, peace, there are better people for you, go buy from them. The next is like competition. I need to be able to call out nuanced differences because you read on G2 and you read all these other places. If I'm trying to make a competitive buy, I want to understand what makes you really different. So you as a seller need to understand your solution as well as your main category competitors as well or better than they know themselves. So you can call out contrast and very simple nuanced differences. Like they do this great, we do this, you're in this box, we're in this box, you fit better in our box for these reasons and here's why. And then, you need to be good at building champions because look, at the end of the day, you need to understand and get to people who can influence the deal in your direction by understanding their personal question wins and the problems you uniquely solve for them. To me, that's buyer enablement and you need to get those things right. Now, if this is outbound sales and this is the only thing I'll add, then you do need to build metrics and you do need to understand more about business case and you do need to get to an economic buyer and all those other things come into play. But if you're coming inbound, someone's already done a bunch of homework, get aligned on criteria and competition first, and then turn them into a champion and then go through the rest of it.
No, I love that. And actually, the way I start most of my conversations is exactly that route, right? There are a lot of things we do well. There are 1,000,001 things that we don't do at all. I want to make sure that we're the right fit for you. If we're not, we want to point you in the right direction. We're all adults. We don't have time. If we're not a good fit, like there's no purpose in closing revenue if you don't solve the problem, if they're just going to churn, and if now all of a sudden they're going to say that you are not a great company because you don't do XYZ, right? Sales is not someone convincing someone that they need to buy something. It is solving a problem, as my dog starts barking. It is solving a problem for a customer, right? And if you can't solve that problem, why are you having those conversations in the first place, right? And I want to be mindful of time because I know we still have a couple of topics we want to jump into, but Brady, I love what you said around sales training and enforcing, right? I'd say the number one thing I hear on all my calls is, and I read this stat and it's pretty crazy. I'll pull it up. It's 84% of sales training is forgotten within 3 months, right? And which is great, right? I mean, you think about anything. 3 months later, it's in one ear and out the other. And I saw this when I was a VP in my last role. I'm sitting there telling him how to run the process till I'm blue in the face. All right. And that was one of the reasons why I wanted to start Recapped in the first place, is so I could just enable my sellers and enable my buyers. But I guess question for the group here is, why do you enforcing of the process and everything that we talked about, right? We had great tips, but enforcing it and actually putting it into practice is really, really difficult. So, and a lot of people struggle with that. So why do you guys think that is? And how do you counter it? How do you actually make this enforceable? And obviously I have my own thoughts on this, but curious, maybe Tony, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I'm a big golfer. I love to golf, and I'm not a great golfer. I'm an average golfer. And during COVID, I made it an effort to get better at golf. So I went and took lessons, and I was on video. I was trying to get my hands in certain positions, rotating at certain timing, etc. This was all on video. This was all things that I needed to practice and work on. Point being is I can't just go to that lesson, work on it one time, and just think magically my golf swing is going to fit in the new slot and the swing is going to feel great. But the fact of the matter is the practice and the things that I had to do to get my swing where it needed to be had actually nothing to do with me even hitting the ball. And I use that because it's very similar to sales training. And, we've done the best we could in terms of designing our training to be interactive, to help people think critically, to help apply it on their own. Like, we've done the best we could. Brady is super educated in adult learning and all that stuff. So we've done the most we could in terms of making the training great, but it really comes down to what happens after. And I will place all of that on sales leadership. And so sales leadership is really key in making sure training sticks. And, it's not going to happen overnight. You can't go to the training and then think 2 months later, 3 months later, all of a sudden, everybody's going to be humming in the right direction. Everything's going to be implemented, et cetera. Just like the golf swing getting better, it's a process, practice. It takes time, but that whole change in terms of the transformation of the team is really dependent upon leadership and management's ability to train and coach to it.
And to build off of Tony's analogy, why is this hard, right? Because he's right. Everything he said is right on. Everything you said is right on, Mark. But human beings, we have a natural tendency when something goes right to be like, all right, I figured that out, right? And to use golf as an example, I lived in Scottsdale for a few years, played with a lot of professional golfers, and I'm like a 10 handicap. I would hit a great shot into the green, foot from the hole. And I was walking around like I was a professional golfer. And this kid said to me, dude, even a broken clock is right twice a day. Right. So like you get a lot of reps become a product of their own success. Like sometimes you're going to get into a deal and it's just everything's going to fall into place and it's going to close, even though you didn't do anything right. You just got lucky. And that one time is it's going to affect your ability to make sure that person stays disciplined when it comes to all this stuff we're talking about. And the same thing happens at the leadership level. You have a great quarter, and guess what? We're coming off of basically like 7 years of like it not being that hard to hit your number if you're in a certain space. So now you've got a bunch of terrible golfers that were hitting really good shots despite their fundamentals being off. And now they're like, I don't understand. Like, I've been doing this for 5 years and it's been working. Why can't I get it next to the hole anymore? And it's because we've moved away from fundamentals. So I think there's a little bit of an emotional mental gap that you need to close as a sales leader and as an individual to understand that, again, even a blind squirrel finds a nut. Like you gotta, the only way for repeatability is through consistent focus on the fundamentals and consistent execution of those fundamentals. Then it's predictable.
And on that note of like consistent execution, like the stat that you're talking about, Mark, is because most sales training has been treated as just like one and done. So the majority of sales training for the last 40, 50 years has been as like one and done. Okay, we're just going to get everybody together in a room and we're going to train for a few days and then we're going to release them into the wild. And it's mostly lecture based, right? So they're just hearing concepts. And the truth is like retention. There's like a whole bunch of like nerdy data that I could share with you, but our ability to retain information from going into some lecture boot camp for a few days is actually only 25, 30%. Like maybe if you engage like a lot of like group discussion, you might get up to 50%, but most training doesn't push people to actually practice and apply what they're learning. And so you immediately have this dip. So one of the things that we have as a rule is we have a 70% like you're doing shit to 30% lecture. So everything you learn, you are immediately applying it. But the other thing is we have a very, very firm rule. You cannot buy training without reinforcement, period. Because it doesn't serve any purpose for you. Like your managers and your leaders have to be able to execute on this. And we're going to be with you and we're going to help you and we're going to train them. We're going to do call coaching with the managers. We're going to coach the call with the reps and we're going to coach the manager on coaching the call with the reps. We're going to do the deal reviews with the managers and then we're going to coach the managers on, do you understand the deal review so that they can keep going. And it's one of the biggest misses in the training space is this notion that you can just one and done it and it's going to work. And so that's why you see that statistic. So anybody that comes to us and they're like, yeah, we want the training, but you're like, I don't think the reinforcement, we're like, we're out. You can't have it. No.
1,000,000%, right? I love this analogy of, the athletes, right? Because if you think about it, so LeBron, as great as he is, you don't think he's going and training and practicing the fundamentals every single day, right? He's played more games than you've made cold calls or you've made demos, yet he is still training. It doesn't matter how great you are at it, you still have to practice, right? Or you will be humbled, right? And I think, I love what you guys said because I do think it's the responsibility of the leadership, and it takes continuous diligence and repetition. And guess what? It's going to be hard work, right? If you want great results, there's no silver bullet that's just going to come in. Like most of life, I think it's really just rolling your sleeves up and doing the damn work, right? And it's funny because like when I was in my last role, this was kind of the realization that we had, right? When I looked at our tech stack, we have so much at the top of the funnel. We have outreach, we have Zoom info. It's all around getting phone numbers and making cold calls and sending emails and, spamming people. But if you think about it, that's only 5% of the sales cycle, 1% of the sales cycle, right? Especially if you're doing complex deals. And in the process that we have from discovery through delivery, where a deal could live for 18 months, we're using emails, spreadsheets, PowerPoints, the same stuff that we've been doing for the last 20, 30 years, right? And so for me, that was kind of the light bulb moment where I realized, I said, I'm not doing a fair job of a leader arming my champions and arming my sales reps to be effective, right? I'm giving them training, I'm giving this, but that training goes out the window when they're on a call trying to figure out what question to ask next, which feature to show, what pricing quote, right? So you need to make it enforceable, right? Create integrated into the reps' daily workflows, right? Obviously, use a tool like Recapped or whatever, but make it systematized, make it something that you cannot mess up. And so that way you don't have to spend time thinking about it. You can just focus on actually having deep conversations and solving problems.
And the sales, B2B sales, probably even B2C sales today is a lot different than it was just 5 years ago. I mean, things have changed so quickly, so fast. All the technology that has come out to help sales teams, good or bad, has really changed the landscape. And so there, to your point, Mark, there is this huge investment on tech stack for top of funnel. But, I would challenge leaders to see what they're investing in for their in-funnel resources, skill development, et cetera, because nowadays conversion rates are a huge topic. Getting leads, getting top of funnel because outbound has gotten so hard is like awesome. And so there needs to be a bigger emphasis on once we get that person in our pipeline, in our funnel, how can we do the best we can to potentially close this deal, assuming we are the right fit for this buyer. And that is where the sales training piece or methodology piece, that's where the deal qualification, forecasting piece all becomes super, super critical. And I mean, I just think back to even 2016, as I started as a sales manager, like it was pretty much a numbers game. I could say, hey team, go send these emails, go make this many calls. I can pretty much guess how many meetings you're going to get. I could pretty much guess how many deals we're going to close. That is out the window now. That's just, sure, it still maybe is a numbers game, but not like it used to be. Now it's very important to become that trusted advisor to the buyer once you get them in your pipeline. To the point earlier with David mentioning, like, they've already done their research, like they've already admitted they have this problem. They're already on the path to potentially trying to solve this problem. So they're already kind of pretty far along. And now it's okay, as sellers, how do we become that trusted advisor and help them understand why they should actually change, why they should actually buy?
I love that. I think I want to be mindful of people's time as we start wrapping up. Obviously, we'll run over a little bit. We've got an extra 30 minutes, but a lot of people can't spend time. That's okay. So we talked about a lot today. What is everyone's, and let's do this as a lightning round. Love to hear two things. One, where are people shitting the bed today? All right, excuse my French. And two, what is the one takeaway for sales leaders or sellers or enablement leaders that are watching this that they can implement tomorrow to make sure that 2024 is a year that is better than 2023? Brady, we'll kick it off with you.
Ooh, I made like a list of all the ways they're shitting the bed, so that if I were to pick the number one area, I feel like it's this notion, we hear it so frequently from like the frontline managers and the leaders. They're like, I don't have time to call coach. I don't have time for a deal review. And my question is always kind of like, okay, well, if you don't have time to do your job, what job are you actually doing? And what I find is the job they're actually doing is they're still selling. They're still operating as an AE, and you hear it from the reps too. The reps are like, every time I go to my manager for guidance, they just take over my deal. They just jump into seller mode. And I think that this is so critical, because if you are a frontline manager and you're managing 7 people, actually call coaching and deal review to get the 7 people up is far more effective than you trying to sell as you, right? So the efficiency of growing 7 versus yourself. It's the concept of, I'm terrible at sports analogies, by the way, guys, but there's the weak link sports and the strong link sports, right? So like basketball's a strong link. You've got 1 or 2 rock stars, you're pretty much going to win the game. Soccer is a weak link sport because you don't touch the ball frequently enough. So you're better off replacing your worst 3 players, right, and getting them up than you are to pay the money for the rock star. Sales is a weak link sport. You don't touch the ball enough. And so you've got to get your bottom players up. And this is the core responsibility of your managers and your core responsibility of the leaders. But they don't know how to do that. That's my theory, is they don't actually have the skill set, and they don't know, and they don't have the training to do this. And so they just default to what they know, which is just selling and trying to treat sales as a strong league sport. I think this is one of the biggest misses that I see, is that management and leadership are not upholding their end of the bargain and their role. And I suppose it's like a double tap, right? Like how they can do this better is I think that management and leadership have to really take this step back and say, okay, no, it is my responsibility to get my bottom players up. Right? Don't just churn and burn them, because that's what they also do. They just, sink or swim. You're not showing results in 6 months. You're out. I'm just going to keep replacing you. It's your core job responsibility to get your bottom players up, because you're in a weak link sport.
Good sports analogy, Brady. Don't give yourself a break. That was good.
Yeah, I agree.
I'll go next, Mark. So I'm going to steal from an old Celtics coach, Rick Pitino. He did this famous press conference where he's like, Robert Parrish, Kevin McHale, and Larry Bird are walking in that door. Here's the deal. Low interest rates and free venture capital money ain't walking in that door. So you, as a sales leader, you need to connect your deal management to your sales process. And then you need to train the shit out of the people that work for you on how to execute. And if you're not doing that, you're going to feed into that 18-month tenure that everybody's been having lately. So it's on you. It's like 100% you're accountable to this. That's your job, not to cowboy and super rep deals. And too many young sales leaders do that. So that's my last nugget.
Love it.
Yeah, I'll add, where people are shitting the bed primarily is just, I mentioned it earlier. They're too focused on their actual product. They're not focused on their buyer. They're not focused on their buyer's world. They're not focused on, why the buyer should actually buy. And from a sales leader perspective, I think this needs to be the mindset. Like I saw some comments around, hey, that'd be great about the onboarding, but that's just not the way our company works. Well, that's fine. But we're at a point in time where we can't operate like we used to. And I think that the biggest takeaway here is to, how do you just start that mindset shift around how do I stop worrying about my product to how do I think about helping my buyer? How do I help the buyer understand why they should change? And, really helping reps and coaching reps level up the conversation. I think one thing we see all the time is reps are not able to take the cool product features that they have and actually link them to stuff that buyers care about. They don't know questions to ask. They don't know how to elevate the conversation. It's because they are too focused on this product side. And that starts with leadership. So at this point, leadership, like you are tasked with hitting the number and you have a chance to have one mindset of, hey, I'm going to do this on my own. I'm going to do it my way. And it's either going to work or I'm going to leave. I'm just going to bounce. Once I don't hit my OTE number, I'm bouncing to the next opportunity. Or you can have the mindset shift. I own this number. I'm going to do whatever it takes to help enable my entire team to hit this number through training, through coaching, through practice, right? There's no professional athlete in the world who got to where they are without a coach and without practicing every single day.
Love that, Tony. So double down on one of the things Brady said. One of the fathers of strengths-based coaching is Marcus Buckingham. And Marcus Buckingham said many years ago in his book, First Break All the Rules, if you don't have time to coach your people on near-term work, stop everything else you're doing and do that instead. So 1,000,000% right. So what do I think? I think find gaps in deals, close gaps in deals, win more deals. So how I look at this, and I was coaching someone here recently. They had worked a deal for like close to 6 months. The CHR was their champion. They were going to CFO for budget. And the CFO shot it down and said, I don't think people are going to use this thing you CHRO want, so I'm not giving you the budget. That was the problem. So I said, okay, cool. What have you done to enable the CHRO and prove the CFO wrong? And they're like, well, we've given them case studies and user stats and, all of these things. I'm like, that's not going to convince them. I said, go call like 20 or 30 field people, the people who are actually going to use the product, and ask them, will you use it? If you use it, what will change? And if that changes, what impact will it have on you and your day-to-day work? They went and did that. And they surveyed a bunch of people, put those pictures of them on the screen, wrote down the quotes, and built a business case of what they learned. They handed that to the CHRO. CHRO brought it to CFO, and CFO was like, oh, I didn't realize that. And you multiply those 30 people by the 1,000 or 500 or couple hundred, whatever they had in the field, and you can now extrapolate a broad business impact. So it's no longer CHRO asking for employees. It was actual financial implications and proving that what they were going to buy was going to be used. Found a gap in a deal, close the gap, won the deal. Find gaps in your deals, close gaps in your deals. Yes.
And I can actually back this up to this idea of the importance of finding the gap, right? Finding the data deficits. We see it. So we acquired a company called Noted Analytics about a year ago, actually. I think that's pretty solidly. I think we acquired November of last year. And we found that when opportunities that go through deal review, if they're in the red, right? So the coding system that David was talking about, if they're in the red, it has a 7% win rate. If it's in the yellow, right? Some information's there, but it's not complete. There's a 17% win rate. When it's in the green, it jumps to a 61% win rate. And there's a competency to this, right? So like we have learned, and Dave and I were chatting actually on LinkedIn because he sees the same thing on his end. It's when I give a green light or Keenan gives a green light, that jumps to 94%. So there is that management competency has that influence. So that's where that training comes in. David sees the same thing. When he gives the green light versus when other people give the green light, there's a massive difference, right? That goes to that training and competency. But it literally works, and that is the better way to forecast.
Yeah.
That's the better way to understand pipeline health.
You're Brady, what you're going into is a firm belief of mine in the stageless sales process and because the sales process broken, it's circles, it's answers to questions, it's not a straight line. And so I'm a big believer of your stages don't predict forecast accuracy. Completed actions and predict forecast accuracy. So to your point, complete actions, learn information, close gaps in information. That then equals higher predictability, lower risk, better forecast accuracy. To your point, 90+% if you do it right.
Yeah.
And all of this too is a collaborative experience, right? You need to work with your buyers, right? You're not selling at them. You're on the same side of the table, solving a current challenge and trying to get something across the finish line that benefits everybody, right? Real quick, I guess I'll share my one takeaway. I was trying to take notes as we were thinking because there's so much that we talked about, but let's do that. I want to wrap a little bit. I know we're running over time. I want to wrap with everyone's where you can find, et cetera. And then we'll leave the last 20, 30 minutes open for Q&A. And there's something I want to reveal as well. But I think as I was thinking through it, David, we talked about this on the last webinar that we did a couple of weeks ago. Right? I think the biggest mistake that 2024 leaders will do, or that will put them in the most danger, is continuing to run the same playbook that they've done. Right? The world has shifted. Continuing, and Tony, I think you mentioned this as well, right? Continuing to focus on the top of the funnel, thinking that you could just run the playbook. We can spend $1 million on ads. It's going to bring in this many leads. We're going to close 20% of them. That's it. Everyone's happy, right? That's not the playbook. I think everything is dead until proven otherwise. Every lead that you have, you need to flip it on its head. You cannot assume that it's just going to close and it's going to go down the playbook. There's very limited budget. There's too many stakeholders. There's too much competition. It's really, really hard to drive this. All right. And so my big takeaway for everybody is just focus on the execution, right? We talked about the deal management, the deal qualification. Create a playbook, right? Implement a mutual action plan. Use it to drive this repeatable sales execution through that middle and bottom of funnel, because if you don't have the execution, I don't think anything else matters. And if the execution between your reps is too great, again, nothing else matters, because then you have this Russian roulette of, will the buyer have a great experience this time or will they have a terrible experience? Right? And because of that, you then can't forecast because you don't know if you're comparing apples to apples or something else. Right? And so I think that to me is the most immediate thing that you can focus on, is really start at the bottom of the funnel and work your way up. Because if you implement something at the top of the funnel, it's going to take 6 to 12 months before you even see the results of that experiment. Whereas if you make small little tweaks, 5%, 10% on the bottom of the funnel, you can have those changes tomorrow. So that's kind of my soapbox. Brady, let's start with you. Where can people find you? What's the best way to get in contact with you?
Yeah, well, I think Crystal was kind enough to drop our LinkedIn profiles at the beginning of the webinar. So I don't know if she's got them. Yeah, look at her. Crystal's like on it. So that's my LinkedIn. And then, if you want to learn more about gap selling and a bit of what we do at a sales growth company, it's super easy. It's salesgrowth.com. Really, really, really easy domain. And I feel like you could probably find the gap selling crew all over LinkedIn these days. I feel like you can't even escape us at this point. Hey, I got to get more books. Believe it or not, that one is actually German. So yeah.
Because no one else is talking.
Tony, I think you're muted.
Oh, Tony.
All right. I'll go. Yeah, I saw Crystal drop LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn all the time. Feel free to hit me up there. I will also drop my email in the chat. Feel free to shoot me a note. If you ever want to chat, shoot ideas around. I'm super passionate about this whole concept that sales teams are at this kind of crossing point, chasm, whatever you want to call it. But there definitely needs to be a shift. Those who have shifted, those who have become buyer centric are the ones who are doing well. And so I'm super passionate about really helping teams go through this change. I had a stint with a company who did agile transformations for technology and business. And I see this as the next wave for sales, this whole just becoming agile, customer centric. So I'll drop my email in there and, happy to chat with you, have a conversation, etc. Oh, thanks, Crystal. She already did it.
Crystal is on top of it.
And everybody, David Weiss, definitely find me on LinkedIn as well. We're all on LinkedIn. My company, thesalescollective.com, is where you can help if you need help with building process and hiring salespeople and onboarding and all those fun things. And if you want to learn more about, Medic, MedPick, any version of that, mydealcoaching.com or davidweissales.com, or just ping me on LinkedIn. Anyways, thank you all for being with us.
Same with me, guys. Find me on LinkedIn. My friends think that I'm a LinkedIn bully. So if you want to see somebody get a LinkedIn wedgie that gives bad advice, I'm not afraid to do it. Nobody's going to fire me anymore. And then website shiftgroup.io. And, if you're looking to hire early stage sellers that understand everything we talked about today, hit us up. That's what we teach. We teach them exactly what all this stuff means and why it matters, even as a BDR. Thanks for having me, Mark.
No, of course. Thank you guys for being such an excellent panelist. I'll share this and then let's spend the next 15, 20 minutes jumping into some questions, but hopefully you can all see my screen. So really, really excited. I know obviously one of the big takeaways coming from this, usually after webinars, is like, man, this is really great advice, but how do we implement it? So we are actually partnering with Tony and Gap Selling and David Weiss on Medic to bring a lot of what we talked about today as free curated templates in our platform with Recapped.io. They're not live just yet. We're still putting the finishing touches. Should be going live probably in the next week or so, but reach out, let us know. That way you can create a free account and really just start implementing this in your team. And if you need any consultation on any of this, I surprisingly am on LinkedIn like everybody else here, though I don't post often enough as my Google reminders like to remind me, but really, really obviously passionate about this. Happy to help in any way, even if it's just pointing you in the right direction with other tools or frameworks or anything. We're going to be hosting a lot of these types of webinars. So if there's anything in particular that you're really hoping to learn, please let us know. And, again, thank you for everybody watching, but thank you for you guys for being a part of this. So let's jump into Q&A. I know there's a lot of questions. Feel free, anyone in the audience, feel free to drop anything in and let's just, first one who wants to answer it, jump in. But this was fantastic. I'm really excited to send this recording out.
Mark, I did see a question at the very beginning around like the difference spiced from winning by design. I don't know if we want to cover that at all, but
Yeah, let's see. I'm trying to find it.
Another acronym. David, I'm not familiar with that.
it's another one.
Winning by Design's framework. They are also a partner. They have it's a spin kind of on Medic. It's really popular. Good portion of our customers use it.
Yeah, main difference between the two, again, most of these are checklists, so don't treat Spiced or any others like a checklist. If you do, they're just not going to be as effective. And the main difference between Medic, MedPick, and Spiced, MedPick encompasses paper process, not just decision process. Spiced is just decision process. Spice also doesn't go as deep around competition and champion. They bundle it into other, pieces of the acronym. MedPick, breaks it out for a deeper level of detail. There's nothing wrong with it. It's great. They actually add critical event as a carve out that, MedPick doesn't. MedPick puts that under decision process as, critical event because it's part of the process of making a decision is the event that drives it. But critical events are really, really important and they carve it out nicely. Yeah, nothing wrong with it. Use Spice, use whatever. But if you're going to use Spice, just make sure that you really think through, are you building champions? Have you nuanced differentiation against competitors, things like that? You want to double click it.
Yeah, excellent point, right? I think the takeaway here is doesn't matter what you do, just do it well, because 90% of the teams out there are not doing it well. And it's Jillian, our friend from MindBridge, had a great question here. When you have started and restarted building your sales program, how do you deal with fatigue?
Who's fatigue? The person executing it, the sellers, who's fatigue?
I was like, I need more details.
Everyone, it sounds
That's
like.
everyone, sales reps. I think at least from our perspective, I know that, going through our training after X number of days, I can see it even virtually on people's faces that they're like, oh my gosh, like that is a lot. So Jillian, I recognize your question there, but I think the way that you deal with it is just to understand that this is not an overnight thing, and just have that mindset that this is a 1, 2, 3 month transition, or 1, 2, 3 month shift or change that we're doing. It's not, okay, we're changing gears and everything is changing tomorrow. Like that's just not going to work. It's not going to stick. I would say, bite-sized pieces, implement change slowly but surely, with the understanding that this is going to take some time.
I'd say you got to highlight when it's working, right? Like you need to show when you close a big deal, you need to celebrate that win in the context of what did they do that we've been trying to teach you that got them this big commission check, right? Like it's just like sports. It's like everybody loved Kobe, and Kobe created a bunch of young basketball players that aren't afraid to work hard because of his mentality. They understood the reason he dropped the points he did is because he was working his ass off. I think you need to frame up your win announcements. It's like, I think, David, you said it. Everybody needs to be speaking the same language, and the language of celebration needs to be in that language as well. And I think the more you hit these folks over the head with, this is why we won, and this is what the outcome was, and this is what we did, then it should become a little bit, get over that fatigue a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, sorry,
I'm
go ahead.
understanding the question. I'm looking, because building the trust to go through it again, right? And you're referring to a sales program. It seems to me that there's been a lot of disruption that you might be describing here in the sales organization. And so I'm going to throw a zinger, actually. I think if you do some reading on change management psychology, managing change, especially big change in an organization, it's hard, right? And if you keep changing it up and reorganize, again, like changing the strategy, be like, yesterday we were doing this thing, and people don't have that solidified structure. If they're not getting to the competency of the first change before it's being changed again, that can really melt people down. And, it's beyond fatigue. There starts to develop this belief that what's being dictated today is just going to be gone in a month. So it doesn't matter. They don't need to learn it. And so each change initiative is like a reduction of like effectiveness, because people are now trained that it might go away. So you might want to consider some change management psychology, because we hate change as humans. We actually hate change. Like the research around it is phenomenal. And obviously I don't know the details here, but I'm just looking at the clues. I'm like, it seems like there might be enough disruption that people are now trained. It can be trained to say, whatever, I don't need to do this because it's just going to change again. And then you never really see that true results of the last initiative.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think actually now is a really great point to just give it a shout out to JR. He's got a mission driven org, right? And I think my personal belief is one of the best ways to not have people go through burnout and fatigue is by hiring people who have gone through hard experiences, right? Like team sports and military, right? And JR, feel free to correct me if there's other avenues that you guys really focus on. But I feel like getting people that have gone through a lot, it makes it so much easier to go through things like this, where, restarting your sales program at the end of the day is, in my opinion, not that crazy of a problem, considering all of the other things that are going on in the world. Right.
Yeah, you can teach a sales process in a few weeks, right? And obviously you need to keep training it. You can't teach somebody to be resilient in a few weeks in an onboarding. You can't teach someone to be coachable. You can't teach someone to be accountable, to be a good teammate. Like those are things that take years, in some cases decades to develop. That's why we focus on the part of the population that we focus on, because we don't have to spend any time teaching those things to people. And it's not a crazy way to hire either, to your point, Mark.
Yeah. All right. 2 more questions. Jillian also had another one about status tracking of deals, where you can look at completeness of deal versus the action you are on the client. I am biased, but I think you should go check out Recapped.io. That is exactly what it does. My plug is over. Leah had a really great question. Question on how to flip the mindset of startups, Series A, Series B, with no processes in place. What would you guys say to the leaders of these types of companies where they're probably trying to figure out the plane as they're trying to fly it and as they're trying to jump out of it at the same time.
That's really hard. I took a CRO gig after Turbo, and the company had 14 customers, and it was founder led when I joined. And I came from this like extremely structured and disciplined process, right, at Turbo. And one of the mistakes I made really early on was trying to lead with that structure, right? It's one of the reasons I'm so passionate about not doing that, is because I've made the mistake of doing it before. So I think you have to come in with an open mind. And here's the reality, and this might not jive with everyone. I think you have to get busy before you can get productive. You need to go out and talk to a bunch of people and run a bunch of deal cycles and figure out why these people are buying, and it not be because they've known the founder for 15 years, right? And they trust them, right? So it really comes down to, like I said, get busy before you can get productive, but then hold yourself accountable to that process that you develop through data and through time.
I'll use a quick analogy. Not sure if it's going to land or not, but if I go to the grocery store, I can carry a certain number of groceries in my hands, in my arms, right? So I think of that as deals, sales. However, if I had a bag to carry those groceries in, I could carry more. I could do it more effectively. I could do it more efficiently, and so on. And Series A, Series B, at this inflection point of, okay, we have funding. We want to go add, let's say, motion to our sales process. I can go hire a bunch of people, right? And just throw them out there to the wild. Or I can focus on making sure we have an efficient engine, process, training, deal qualification before we do that. And so I'll just throw that out there.
Man, we have a lot of analogies today. And they're all spot on. Christine, I love that. Thank you, Tony. Christine had a really great question here. I'm in sales enablement. We're consistently training the sales team on personas, personalization, sales processes and methodologies, MEDDIC, et cetera. Unfortunately, sales leaders are not doing their part to follow up and inspect their sales teams to ensure that they're actually implementing these skills. We have metrics to monitor and gauge ROI from an enablement standpoint, but what do you recommend when there's a lack of leadership support, as it's impossible for sales enablement to individually review all of salespeople's calls?
I feel like Christine's hitting one of my biggest pet peeves in sales environments. Is it blows my mind that most people don't have sales enablement like in with leadership, aligned with leadership regularly. Like trying to do all that as sales enablement and leadership isn't on board. Like my instinct is kind of like, get out and get a better job, but it blows my mind. You're not wrong. It's infuriating, and frankly, it's dumb. And it kind of goes back to, our first conversation around, where leadership is shitting the bed. We all were pretty aligned that leadership is shitting the bed in this specific category, that they're not reinforcing, they're not consistent. Like every manager is doing their own thing if they're managing it all. So I have all the empathy in the world for you, because that is such a pet peeve of mine. Your enablement leaders should be with the leaders. They should be working together. You should have a seat at the table. You should be at the QBRs. You should be their equal and partner in the sales organization.
Here's the one thing I'll add to that, and maybe the only little bit of challenge. If you don't get to the CRO who is over those star leaders and get that person to ask the questions that the leaders need to ask their reps, the leaders will never ask the question.
Yes.
That's it. Get them to do the work and everything else follows. But if they're not willing, good luck.
Deal management rolls downhill. Right. I was going to say one other thing. I both very, very eloquently said. One of our culture values here is zero bullshit. We try to abide by it. I think if that's the case and that's how you feel, I would find an avenue to have a conversation where you guys talk this through, and maybe you put it in a nicer way than I put it, right? But they need to know that this is how it feels. And if you guys are not rowing in the same direction, what are you even doing here in the first place?
Yeah, and I'll throw a devil's advocate out here. I've also heard it the other way where, sales leaders feel like enablement is not supporting them or, what they need or the support they need. So I'm not saying anyone is right or wrong, but I come back to this concept of alignment. And so if you do feel like sales leaders are not kind of going along with what Enablement's trying to do, I think it is worth the conversation to just understand why. Like, why are we misaligned here? What's going on? And just literally be open and honest with them in terms of like why they're not on board. And you might find something else. Like you might learn something that can help you better position yourself in enablement to be able to help them.
And I don't necessarily know if this is what's happening like in your organization, but one of the things that I have observed a few times when enablement brings in training into the organization is sales leadership has a bit of a mindset around training where they're like, okay, we gave you training, check the box, you got training, so now you have no excuse not to hit your number. And they don't really tap into the importance of reinforcing the training. It's this idea of like, all right, no more excuses, like now go get it. And I don't know if that's necessarily happening in your org, but I have seen this more than once. And I find that to be a bit of like a toxic mindset to just be like, okay, now you have no excuse. Like we're just taking excuses off the table. You got your training, here you go. Yeah. And again, I don't know if that's what's actually happened, but I have seen that happen before, which is another one. I have a lot of pet peeves. It's another one of my pet peeves.
I think we found a topic for our next webinar. So awesome. I think that's probably a great way to end and wrap this. Team, thank you so much. I think this was an incredible conversation. We covered so much. Everybody listening, thank you for your time. I know it's end of year, it's stressful, it's busy. We've all got a million things. So the fact that you're spending time with us is really, really appreciated. Reach out to these people. They are amazing. They are very great at what they do and they love to help. So in any way, but seriously, thank you everybody. The recordings will be sent. If you have any questions, please feel free. If you have any recommendations on what topics you'd like to hear, we're going to start doing these all the time. You may see some of these people back. I hope you do. And if they'll have us. And really, let's finish strong. Let's plan for 2024 and let's focus on excellence. Awesome.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.